So I usually start when I speak on how Venezuela was before all of this happened, you know. If you're all in Texas, right? We're in Texas, an oil country, and most of you have heard about Venezuela when it was an oil power around the world, right? Venezuela had a lot of relationships with Texas because all the oil from Venezuela came here and was refined in the Gulf of Mexico's oil refineries, right? So what I want to show you right now is a little bit about what Venezuela looked like.
Enjoying a prosperity boom unparalleled in the history of South America. Led by the President of Venezuela, they've been recently celebrating the second anniversary of a gigantic building program, embodying the most up-to-date conceptions of urban development. But where does all the money come from? The answer lies under the ground, where rich oil deposits ensure a steady revenue. Well, the population figures have nearly tripled in the last 10 years. It's certainly a fantastic city, this new Caracas.
So that's very different from what we see today, isn't it, right? And the truth is that today we see this, which is nothing in the supermarkets. I have to do that myself, you know. I have to make lines for hours to buy things like toothpaste and flour. I was denied what I wanted to buy in the supermarket. I remember one time I forgot my ID. The government installed a national ID for the rationing system. And based on the last number of your cédula, of your ID, that was the day that you were allowed to go to the supermarket to buy the groceries. So my ID finished in the number 1. So that meant that I could go Mondays and Saturdays. For several years, that was the rationing system. Then they kept changing it, right? Sometimes it was the ID number. Sometimes it was where you lived. Sometimes everything came back. Sometimes we just didn't have anything, right? I was in school, in high school, and then teachers would just suddenly get out of class. Hey, there's toilet paper in the supermarket down the street. We need to get out. So class is dismissed. And you see how that affected our whole lives, right? From education to healthcare, because there were no drugs. Now, why is this happening, right? You would ask yourself. Well, according to Bernie Sanders, it's probably the fault of the United States. Children with diseases, this is a picture of the New York Times, so not even a right-wing source that people could complain about. Diseases that we didn't even see before are coming back. And there's 5 million Venezuelans like myself who have fled our country in the last 4 years, in a country of about 30 million people. So that's like saying that 60 million people left the United States over 4 years. That's like 2 Texas or more. So who's to fault? These 2 men are to fault. Socialist politicians, specifically Chavez, who was elected in 1998, in December 1998, 1 month before I was born. So I never even lived a different government. I only lived under the regime of these 2 men, one of which died, and just handpicked his successor. And the policies that they implemented were the policies that are now being pushed for by the radical socialist Democrats in America. And that's what has pushed me to come here and speak to you and go on the news and spread the word about it, because it's no joke. I didn't come to America so that Venezuela would come to me, right? I left Venezuela with the goal of finding freedom, being prosperous, and enjoying the life that every human being should have. Which are those policies? These are not Denmark. This is not Norway. I'm talking about price controls. I'm talking about nationalization of businesses. I'm talking about regulation of businesses that destroys the economy, and that's what they did in Venezuela. Because if you put price controls on goods, there's not going to be a profit for businesses, and therefore businesses are just not going to sell them at all. What does the left propose here in the United States? Well, Bernie Sanders supports nationalizing public utilities, that the federal government runs public utilities. He wants to nationalize healthcare. Not like the Nordic countries, by the way. He wants to ban private insurance. You can have private insurance in Norway, in Spain, in Denmark. You can have private insurance in all those countries. And in fact, despite them paying so much in taxes, still 20% of the population in most European countries has private insurance because their government healthcare sucks. Imagine having already to pay for government healthcare, but you still choose to take even more of your income to pay for private insurance. It's not because public government healthcare is good. It's because it's terrible that those people do that. And that's the fortunate ones who can pay for that, right? In Venezuela, it was even worse because of all the price controls they implemented on drugs, on products, and price controls they want to implement on drugs in America, by the way. There was no drug innovation. We didn't have any drugs in the drugstores, and therefore people died of diseases. Let me take this horrible picture of your site. 1998, before Chavez was elected, people used to say, Venezuela will never be like Cuba. We're not an island. How can we become like Cuba? We have so much oil. Well, today Venezuela is poorer than Cuba. It is better to live in Cuba today than in Venezuela, despite us having the most oil reserves in the world. And in America today, they're telling you, America is not Venezuela, right? The same politicians who told Venezuela that Venezuela wasn't Cuba. And the Cubans, by the way, were told Cuba is not the Soviet Union. So that is how this works. And then we see, it's not even, I don't even have to come back to past statements of Bernie Sanders or other Democrats. He himself yesterday said that not everything of Cuba's revolution was bad. Yesterday on CNN. Not everything in Cuba's revolution was bad. They had great literacy programs. So literacy programs that, by the way, were just indoctrination of communist propaganda. That's what they were, because that's what happens when one politician gets control over the government and they want the government to do everything. We need to understand something. The government can't do everything. That's not what the government is for. The government is for protecting our rights. And what are those rights? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's why this country was founded upon those values. And that's providing for safety, for courts, for the police, the military. And yes, we can help the poor, and we should help the poor. Not only through charity, but even the government can do many things. But what's happening today in this country? Why do so many people want the government to do everything and give everything away for free? Because there are problems, right? Housing is expensive, college is expensive. How do we solve those struggles? And that's the challenge for us, those who are not socialists, right? Those who believe in the free enterprise system. How do we solve those challenges that make so many young people, especially my age in this country, support socialism? Well, I have many solutions. One of them is ending government regulation of so many things that makes them so expensive. Zoning restrictions in most cities, this is not even a federal issue, this is about local issues, right? This is states and cities that can solve them. Zoning is making housing so expensive in so many places. College is expensive because the federal government gives so many loans for free to people who are going to get college degrees that are not even worth it, right? How much are you going to make if you get a college degree in gender sciences, right? You're not going to make anything. It's not that it needs to be banned. People should study whatever they want. This is a free country. But they shouldn't do it at the government's dime. That is a different thing. And because they do it at the government's dime, there's no cost control. And that's what happened in Venezuela too, right? Because the government subsidized so many things. I owned a gas station. My family owned a gas station. That's what we used to do before the government took over everything. And how it worked was that the government actually subsidized gasoline. Imagine that. It was basically free. And because it was basically free, there was no control over how much people would drive or, waste it. People would actually clean things with gasoline. Imagine how dangerous that is, because it was free. It was cheaper than water. So that's what happens when you make college subsidized by the government. People that are taking on degrees that they shouldn't take. More people should graduate in engineering and STEM sciences, not in those things. And it's all because of the government. Same in healthcare, right? There are certificate of need laws that hospitals to be built in this country, in most states, actually need to prove to the government that there is a need for a hospital. How will a hospital be bad for the community? There's no way in which it will be bad. It might be better or less good, but the government puts so many barriers on businesses that are going to do a good for the community that services are just more expensive. And the Republican Party and people who believe in free markets, we need to come up with solutions to those problems, because if we're not proposing solutions and we only criticize socialism, which is something we should criticize, then the socialists have the advantage, right? Because their proposals are free college, free healthcare, free housing, free electricity. It's going to come next, I'm sure, because, you know, how do you live without electricity? Free food. All of this is going to come to us, and we need to have proposals against those things. Now, in Venezuela, we used to say something also that I think it's important to appreciate and get a grasp on, which is we were rich and we didn't know it. That's something many Venezuelans say today. In America, we are rich and we don't appreciate how rich we are. And rich doesn't mean that we're billionaires. We're not billionaires, right? Well, some people are, but we're not. But having electricity, having water, having a rooftop, we actually live better than the medieval kings. Poor people in America live better than the medieval kings. Poor people in America live better than most middle-class people around the world. You know, I was middle class in Venezuela, but middle class meant not having electricity several times a week because there were blackouts, because the government owned public utilities, meant that I had to do lines in supermarkets. So that was middle class. That's middle class in Venezuela, right? Middle class was earning $100 a month in Venezuela. The United States is a very different country where even the poor have electricity, have internet connection. 90% of poor households in America, according to the census, have internet connection. It's a very different thing that we need to get a grasp on. Because once we are grateful for what we have, and then we come up with solutions for the future, then that's how we're going to stop socialism in this country. We're not going to stop them by just attacking them, which we should. We need to come up with solutions for those problems. Something else I want to tell you regarding Venezuela and Cuba and all these countries is that these politicians are not even being shy about it. They're not even hiding their intentions. They're supporting these foreign dictators. And the Hispanic community is very powerful for this, right? Actually, Hispanics are going to keep voting, keep growing as a percentage of the population in this country, and we need to mobilize them. But many Hispanics didn't live what happened through in Venezuela and Cuba. Many are the children, the grandchildren of people who came to this country, and they're disconnected from those roots. So we need to also keep teaching that to our children. It's not a work that we need a politician to come and help us, or we just need Congress to do something. Every one of us can change this country for the better by teaching our children the values of freedom, by teaching them that socialism didn't work outside of the United States, it won't work inside of the United States. It doesn't even work where it's implemented. The veteran system, which is government-owned, it's government hospitals, it doesn't work. That's why President Trump had to give veterans choice, right, so that they could go to private hospitals, which is a great solution. And we need to teach our children, especially Hispanics, need to teach our children that we are a people that want freedom. We're not a people that want free things. We support hard work. We support freedom of religion. Socialism is the enemy of religion. And that's how we're going to save this country from socialism. Now, I know that the topic of Venezuela is usually a sad topic, right? Because it's a country that went from so much to so little. But I want to end up in a nice note because I think it gives us hope. And if something was good about what happened in Venezuela was that so many Venezuelans learned, unfortunately the hard way, the lesson of socialism. And I'm very happy that there are hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans, there are over 1 million Cubans, there are hundreds of thousands of people who escaped communism and came to this country. And I can assure you that we are going to do everything we can to stop America from becoming a socialist country. Thank you very much.